David Chen pulled his phone away from his ear and sighed. Another conference call that could have been an email. Another hour of his life spent listening to people argue about things that didn't really matter in the big picture. He looked at his expensive watch. 3:47 p.m. on a Tuesday afternoon. Most people were just getting through their workday. But for David, this was already his third major meeting since lunch. At 42, David had built his tech company from nothing into a billion-dollar empire. People called him a genius. Business magazines put his face on their covers. Everyone wanted to shake his hand at fancy parties. But right now, walking down Fifth Avenue in his perfectly tailored suit, he felt tired in a way that sleep couldn't fix. His assistant had texted him the address for his next meeting. Some investor wanted to discuss a potential merger over coffee. David checked his GPS and realized he could cut through Central Park to save 10 minutes. Time was everything in his world. Every minute counted toward something bigger, something more profitable, something more important. The park was quieter than usual for a Tuesday afternoon. Most kids were probably still in school. David's expensive shoes clicked against the concrete path as he walked quickly past joggers and dog walkers. He had his phone out ready to make another call when something made him stop. On a green bench about 30 feet away sat a small boy, maybe 7 or 8 years old. The kid was just sitting there, swinging his legs back and forth, staring at the trees. His backpack was beside him, covered in superhero stickers. David looked around expecting to see a parent nearby, maybe someone on another bench or pushing a stroller. But there was nobody. David's first thought was to keep walking. Not his problem. He had places to be. But something about the scene bothered him. The boy looked so small sitting there alone, and it was a school day. Why wasn't this kid in class? Against his better judgment, David found himself walking toward the bench. The boy looked up as he approached. He had bright brown eyes and a gap between his front teeth that showed when he smiled. "Hi there," David said, not really sure how to talk to children. "Are you okay?" The boy's face lit up. "Oh, are you Kevin's dad? Mrs. Johnson said someone's dad might pick me up early today for the dentist appointment." David blinked. "I'm sorry, what?" "Kevin Martinez. He sits next to me in Mrs. Peterson's class. Room 204. The boy looked hopeful. "She said his dad was coming to get him, but maybe you're here for me instead." "No, David looked around again. "I think you have me confused with someone else. I'm not anyone's dad." The boy's smile faded just a little. "Oh, sorry. You look like someone who would be somebody's dad, though." David didn't know what to make of that comment. "Are you supposed to be in school right now?" "Half day today. Teacher training or something. Mom said she'd pick me up after her shift ends, but that's not until 5:30. The boy shrugged like this was perfectly normal. "I wait here sometimes. It's nice, quiet." David checked his watch again. It was almost 4 o'clock now. This kid had been sitting here for who knows how long and would be sitting here for another hour and a half. Alone. "Where's your mom work?" David found himself asking. "St. Mary's Hospital. She's a nurse aide." "Well, kind of. She helps the nurses and cleans the rooms and stuff." The boy spoke with obvious pride. "She works really hard. Sometimes she has to work late, so I wait at the community center, but they don't open until 5 on Tuesdays." David felt something twist in his chest. This kid was 8 years old, maybe younger, and he had his whole afternoon figured out like some kind of business schedule. Wait at the park until 5, then walk to the community center, then wait there until Mom got off work. "What's your name?" David asked, sitting down on the bench. He told himself he was just resting for a minute. "Tommy." The boy grinned again. "What's yours?" "David." "Nice to meet you, David." Tommy stuck out his hand for a handshake like he was copying something he'd seen adults do. His hand was so small in David's that it almost disappeared completely. "Nice to meet you too, Tommy." David found himself smiling for the first time all day. "So you just wait here by yourself every Tuesday?" "Not just Tuesdays. Sometimes Mondays too if Mom has to cover for someone, and Wednesdays if Mrs. Garcia can't watch me." Tommy kicked his feet against the bench. "But I don't mind. I like watching people. Like that lady over there with the 3 dogs. She comes every day at the same time. And that old man who feeds the pigeons. He always brings the same kind of bread." David followed Tommy's gaze and realized the boy was right. He'd never noticed these details about the park, even though he'd walked through it dozens of times. To David, the park was just a shortcut. To Tommy, it was like watching a daily TV show. "Don't you get bored just sitting here?" David asked. Tommy shrugged. Sometimes. But Mom says I'm good at entertaining myself. She taught me to count things when I get restless. Like right now, I've seen 17 different kinds of dogs walk by, and 4 people wearing red shirts, and 2 people talking on phones while they're supposed to be walking their kids. David suddenly realized he was one of those people. His phone was still in his hand, ready to make another call. He slipped it into his pocket. That's pretty observant of you. Mom says I notice things other people miss. Tommy swung his legs harder, like how you keep checking your watch. Are you late for something important? David was about to say yes. He had a meeting in 20 minutes with people who controlled millions of dollars. But looking at this kid, sitting alone on a bench with his superhero backpack, something felt off about calling that meeting important. Maybe, David said instead, but maybe not as important as I thought. Tommy nodded seriously, like he understood exactly what David meant. Mom says sometimes we think things are bigger deals than they really are. Like when I was scared to give my book report last month. I thought everyone would laugh at me, but they didn't. Nobody even remembered it the next day. For a moment, David just sat there. When was the last time someone had talked to him like this? Not trying to sell him something or ask for something or impress him with something, just talking. Like people used to do. His phone buzzed with a text. Probably his assistant wondering where he was. David glanced at it, then put the phone away without reading the message. So what do you usually do while you wait? He asked Tommy. Tommy's eyes lit up again. Want to see? David found himself nodding, and for the first time in years, he completely forgot about the time. Tommy reached into his backpack and pulled out a small notebook, its cover decorated with stickers of cartoon characters. The pages were filled with careful handwriting and pencil. I write down interesting things I see, Tommy explained, flipping through the pages. Like yesterday, I saw a woman drop her wallet, and this teenager ran after her to give it back. And last week, there was this really old couple who came here every day to feed the ducks, and they held hands the whole time. David looked at the notebook. Each entry was dated in Tommy's careful handwriting. Some had little drawings next to them. Stick figures of people, simple sketches of dogs, rough outlines of the park benches. This is pretty amazing, Tommy, David said, and he meant it. You're like a reporter. That's what I want to be when I grow up. Tommy's whole face brightened. A newspaper reporter, or maybe someone who makes documentaries. Mom says I'm good at noticing the stories other people miss. David thought about his own childhood. At Tommy's age, he'd been shuttled between private tutors and expensive after-school programs. His parents were always busy with work, just like he was now. He'd never had time to just sit and watch the world go by. What kind of stories do you like the most? David asked. Tommy thought for a moment, tapping his pencil against his lips. The ones about people being nice to each other, I guess. Like there's this homeless man who sits by the subway entrance sometimes, and every Tuesday this lady in a blue coat brings him coffee and a sandwich. She never makes a big deal about it. Just sets it down next to him and smiles. You notice her every week? Yeah. She doesn't know I'm watching, but she always does it. Same time, same coffee cup, same kind of sandwich. Turkey, I think. Tommy grinned. I wrote a whole story about her in here. I call her the coffee angel. David's phone buzzed again. This time he pulled it out and saw 3 missed calls from his assistant and 2 text messages asking where he was. The meeting was starting in 10 minutes. These people had flown in from Los Angeles just to talk to him. He should be running. Instead, he turned the phone off completely and slipped it back into his pocket. David? Tommy was looking at him with those bright brown eyes. Are you sure you're not somebody's dad? You seem like you would be good at it. The question hit David harder than he expected. What makes you say that? Well, you stopped to check on me. And you're listening to my stories instead of looking at your phone like most grown-ups do. And you have kind eyes. Tommy said this last part very seriously, like he was sharing an important secret. David didn't know what to say to that. Nobody had ever told him he had kind eyes before. People usually described him as focused, driven, successful. Never kind. I don't have any kids, Tommy. Why not? It was such a simple question. But David found himself struggling to answer it. Why not? He'd always been too busy building his company. Too focused on the next deal the next day. The acquisition, the next board meeting. He'd dated plenty of women over the years, but it never seemed to stick. They all wanted more time than he had to give. I guess I've been too busy with work, David said finally. Tommy nodded like this made perfect sense. Mom's always busy with work too. But she says I'm the most important part of her job, even though I'm not really part of her job. Does that make sense? It did make sense in a way that made David's chest feel tight. Your mom sounds pretty smart. She is. She knows everything. Like how to make pancakes shaped like Mickey Mouse, and what to do when I have bad dreams and how to fix my bike when the chain falls off. Tommy's voice was full of admiration. She says being a parent is the hardest job in the world, but also the best one. David found himself wondering what that would feel like, to have someone look at him the way Tommy looked when he talked about his mom. To be someone's whole world, their safe place, their hero. A jogger ran past them, followed by a woman walking two small dogs. The afternoon sun was starting to sink lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the grass. David realized he'd been sitting on this bench for almost 30 minutes now. 30 minutes of his carefully scheduled day, gone, and somehow he didn't care. Tommy, he said slowly, how long do you usually wait here before your mom comes? Until she gets off work. Sometimes a little longer if the bus is late. Tommy looked at his own small digital watch. A cheap plastic thing that was probably a gift. She should be here in about an hour. David made a decision that surprised him. Would it be okay if I waited with you? Until she gets here? Tommy's face broke into the biggest smile David had seen all day. Really, you want to stay? Yeah, David said, and realized he really did. I want to stay. For the first time in 20 years, David Chen missed a business meeting on purpose. And somehow, sitting on a park bench with an 8-year-old boy and his notebook full of stories, he felt like he was exactly where he needed to be. Tommy closed his notebook and looked at David with curious eyes. So what do you do for work? You're wearing a really fancy suit. David glanced down at his tailored jacket. It probably cost more than most people made in a month. I run a technology company. We make apps and software, like games. Some games, but mostly business stuff. Things to help other companies work better. David realized how boring that sounded when he said it out loud. What about you? What's your favorite subject in school? English, Tommy said immediately. I love writing stories. Mrs. Peterson says I have a good imagination. He paused, then added quietly, but I'm not so good at math. Mom tries to help me with homework, but she gets home pretty late and she's always really tired. David felt that familiar twist in his chest again. Math can be tricky. What part gives you the most trouble? Word problems mostly. Like if Johnny has 12 apples and gives away 4, how many does he have left? I can do the numbers part, but sometimes I don't understand what the problem is really asking. Without thinking, David said, I could help you with that. Math was always my favorite subject. Tommy's eyes went wide. Really? You'd help me with homework? David stopped. What was he doing? He didn't know this kid. He had companies to run, meetings to attend, deals to close. I mean, if your mom says it's okay, she'd probably cry, Tommy said matter-of-factly. Happy crying, not sad crying. She worries about me falling behind because she can't always help. She works so hard. The way Tommy talked about his mother with such understanding and pride made David's throat feel tight. At 8 years old, this kid already understood sacrifice in a way David wasn't sure he'd ever really grasped. Tell me more about your mom, David said. Tommy's whole face lit up. Her name is Rosa. She's the prettiest mom in the whole world, and she makes the best grilled cheese sandwiches. She sings while she cooks even when she's super tired, and she always reads me a story before bed no matter how late she gets home. Sounds like she's pretty amazing. She is. Tommy swung his legs against the bench. Sometimes I hear her crying at night, though, when she thinks I'm asleep. I think it's because money is tight. That's what she tells her sister on the phone. Money's tight this month. David's heart clenched. Here was this kid, wise beyond his years, carrying worries that no 8-year-old should have to think about. Do you have any brothers or sisters? David asked, though he suspected he knew the answer. Nope, just me and Mom. It's always been just us. Tommy looked down at his hands. My dad left when I was really little. I don't really remember him. There it was. The missing piece that explained so much about this mature, observant little boy who waited patiently in parks and noticed the small kindnesses of strangers. I'm sorry. Tommy, that must be hard sometimes. Tommy shrugged, but David could see it wasn't as casual as he pretended. Mom says he wasn't ready to be a dad. She says some people just aren't good at staying, but she stayed, so that's what matters. The simple acceptance in Tommy's voice broke something inside David's chest. This kid had learned at 8 years old what David was just beginning to understand at 42. that showing up was everything. Do you ever wonder about him? Your dad, I mean. Tommy was quiet for a long moment, kicking his heels against the bench. Sometimes, especially at school when they have those Father's Day things or when kids talk about going fishing with their dads or playing catch. He looked up at David. Do you ever think about having kids? The question caught David off guard. Not really. I've always been too focused on work. But don't you get lonely? In your big house by yourself? David blinked. How did this kid know he lived in a big house alone? How do you know I live by myself? You just seem like it. You have that look people get when they spend too much time alone. And your phone keeps buzzing, but you turned it off to talk to me. That means you don't have anyone at home wondering where you are. The accuracy of Tommy's observation was startling. David did live alone in a massive penthouse apartment. He ate most of his meals alone, worked alone in his home office, fell asleep alone watching the news. When had this 8-year-old become so perceptive about adult loneliness? You're pretty smart, you know that? Tommy grinned. Mom says I'm an old soul. I don't really know what that means, but I think it's good. A comfortable silence settled between them. David watched the same joggers and dog walkers that Tommy had been observing, trying to see them through the boy's eyes. There was the lady with 3 dogs that Tommy had mentioned, an elderly woman who seemed to genuinely enjoy the chaos of tangled leashes and excited barking. There was a businessman like David, talking loudly on his phone while completely ignoring the beautiful afternoon around him. David? Tommy's voice was softer now, more hesitant. Yeah? Can I ask you something kind of personal? David almost laughed. After everything they'd just talked about, what could be more personal? Sure. Do you think there's something wrong with kids who don't have dads? Like, are we missing something important? The question hit David like a physical blow. He turned to look at Tommy, really look at him. This incredible kid who was thoughtful and funny and wise and kind. This kid who worried he might be somehow incomplete. Tommy, no, absolutely not. There's nothing wrong with you at all. David struggled to find the words. You're pretty amazing, actually. But like at school when they do those projects where you have to draw your family tree, mine's always missing a whole side. And at the science fair last month, all the other kids had their dads helping them build their projects. Mom tried to help with mine, but she had to work a double shift, so I mostly did it myself. David's chest felt like it was being squeezed. What was your project about? Solar energy. I made this little house with solar panels that could light up an LED. Tommy's voice was proud, but there was sadness underneath. It didn't win anything, but Mrs. Peterson said it was really creative. That sounds incredibly cool. You built that yourself? Mostly. I watched YouTube videos to figure out the hard parts. Tommy looked down at his notebook. But it would have been nice to have someone help. Someone who knew about building things and didn't have to leave for work. David felt something shift inside his chest. Without really thinking about it, he said, I know about building things. Solar panels, electronics, all that stuff. Tommy's head snapped up. Really? Really? I studied engineering before I got into business. David found himself making another impulsive decision. Maybe next time you have a science project, I could help. If your mom says it's okay. Tommy's smile was so bright it could have powered his solar project all by itself. That would be so cool. You really mean it? I really mean it. They sat quietly for another moment, both of them processing this new possibility. Then Tommy said something that stopped David's world completely. You know what's funny? Everyone always asks me what I want for my birthday or Christmas or when I've been really good. Tommy looked up at the sky, where the first stars were just starting to appear. They think I want video games or toys or maybe a new bike, but I don't need any of that stuff. What do you want then? David asked, though something in his gut told him he wasn't ready for the answer. Tommy turned to look at him with those bright, honest eyes. I don't need toys, David. I just want a dad. The words hung in the air between them like a prayer, simple and devastating. And completely honest. David felt his throat close up. In all his years of high-stakes negotiations and million-dollar deals, nothing had ever left him as speechless as this 8-year-old boy's quiet confession. Tommy seemed to realize the weight of what he'd just said, because he quickly added, I mean, not just any dad, but someone who would stay. Someone who would help with homework and come to school plays and maybe teach me to ride a bike without training wheels. He paused. Someone who would choose to be my dad, you know. David's vision blurred. He blinked hard, shocked to realize there were tears in his eyes. When was the last time he'd cried? He couldn't even remember. "Tommy," he said, his voice rougher than usual, "you deserve all of that. You deserve someone who shows up." And for the first time in his adult life, David Chen found himself wishing he could be that someone. David was still trying to process Tommy's words when he heard footsteps on the path behind them. He turned to see a woman walking quickly toward their bench, her face a mixture of concern and exhaustion. She wore light blue scrubs and comfortable sneakers, with her dark hair pulled back in a ponytail that had come loose during her long day. "Tommy," she called out, her voice carrying relief and worry in equal measure. "Mom." Tommy jumped up from the bench, his notebook falling to the ground. He ran to meet her, and she wrapped him in a tight hug that lasted several seconds longer than usual. "I'm so sorry I'm late, baby. The bus broke down and I had to wait for the next one." She pulled back to look at him, checking him over like she did every day, making sure he was okay. Then her eyes shifted to David, who was still sitting on the bench. Rosa's entire posture changed. Her shoulders straightened and she stepped slightly in front of Tommy, her protective instincts kicking in immediately. "Tommy, who is this man?" Her voice was polite but guarded. "This is David," Tommy said excitedly, completely missing the tension in his mother's voice. "He's been waiting with me. He knows about math and solar panels, and he said he might help me with my next science project." Rosa's eyes narrowed slightly. She looked David up and down, taking in his expensive suit, his perfectly styled hair, his gold watch. Everything about him screamed money and privilege, things that were completely foreign to her world. David stood up slowly, recognizing the protective fear in Rosa's eyes. He'd seen that look before in business, people who'd been taken advantage of, who'd learned to be suspicious of anyone who seemed too good to be true. "Hello," he said gently, keeping his distance. "I'm David Chen. I was just walking through the park when I noticed Tommy sitting here alone. I wanted to make sure he was safe until you arrived." "He wasn't alone," Rosa said firmly. "He was waiting for me like we planned." "Of course," David said quickly. "I didn't mean to imply otherwise. Tommy explained that you work at the hospital. He's very proud of you." Rosa's expression softened just a fraction at that, but she was still wary. "Tommy, go get your backpack. We need to head home." "But Mom," David was telling me about engineering and— "Tommy, backpack now." Tommy's face fell, but he obeyed. Walking back to the bench to collect his things, David could see the boy glancing between him and his mother, confused by the sudden tension. Rosa waited until Tommy was out of immediate earshot before stepping closer to David. When she spoke, her voice was low and fierce. "Listen, I don't know what your game is, but my son is not some charity case for you to feel good about. We don't need your help and we don't need your money." David held up his hands. "I'm not trying to— Men like you don't just happen to be in parks talking to kids like mine," Rosa continued. "You want something. Maybe it's tax write-offs. Maybe it's some story you can tell at your fancy parties about helping the poor single mother. But we're not your project." Her words stung because David could see how she'd gotten there. How many times had people looked at her and Tommy and seen an opportunity to feel better about themselves? How many well-meaning strangers had offered help with strings attached? "You're right to be protective," David said quietly. "If I had a son, I'd want his mother to be exactly like you." Something in his tone made Rosa pause. She studied his face more carefully. "But I'm not here because I think you need saving," David continued. "I'm here because your son is remarkable. In the last hour, he's taught me more about what really matters than I've learned in the past 20 years. Tommy came back with his backpack, looking between them uncertainly. "Are you guys fighting?" "No, sweetheart," Rosa said immediately, her voice gentle again. "We're just talking." "David, are you coming with us?" Tommy asked hopefully. "Tommy, that's not—" Rosa started. "Actually," David interrupted gently, "I was hoping I could walk with you guys to the bus stop, if that's okay with your mom." Rosa looked at him suspiciously. "Why?" David glanced at Tommy, who was watching this exchange with the kind of careful attention kids develop when they're used to reading adult moods. He chose his words carefully. "Because Tommy told me about his solar panel project, and about how he usually has to figure out his science homework by watching YouTube videos." David met Rosa's eyes. "I studied electrical engineering at MIT. I could help him understand the concepts better." "We can't pay you for tutoring," Rosa said immediately. "I'm not asking for payment." "Then what are you asking for?" David was quiet for a moment. trying to figure out how to explain something he barely understood himself. Honestly, I'm not sure. I just know that sitting on that bench with Tommy was the best hour I've had in a really long time. Rosa stared at him, clearly trying to figure out if he was sincere or just very good at manipulation. Tommy looked between them, sensing this conversation was important but not understanding why. "Can we just walk to the bus stop?" Tommy asked quietly. "Please." Rosa looked down at her son's hopeful face, then back at David. After a long moment, she nodded. "Fine, but just to the bus stop." They started walking down the path together, Tommy between them, chattering excitedly about his day at school. David learned that Tommy's teacher had complimented his book report, that he'd helped a new student find the cafeteria, and that he was worried about an upcoming math test. "What kind of math problems are giving you trouble?" David asked. "Division with remainders," Tommy said with a sigh. "I understand the regular division, but when there's stuff left over, I get confused about what to do with it." "That's actually pretty easy once you understand what a remainder really means," David said. "It's just the stuff that doesn't fit evenly into groups." He stopped walking and picked up a small stick from the ground. "Can I show you?" Tommy nodded eagerly. David broke the stick into several small pieces. "Let's say you have 15 pieces of candy, and you want to share them equally among 4 friends. How many pieces would each friend get?" Tommy counted on his fingers. 3 pieces each. That's 12 pieces total, right? And how many pieces are left over? 3. That's your remainder. The 3 pieces that don't divide evenly. David handed Tommy the 3 remaining stick pieces. "In math, we write that as 15 divided by 4 equals 3 remainder 3. Tommy's eyes lit up. "Oh, so the remainder is just the leftovers." "Exactly." Rosa had stopped walking too, watching this impromptu math lesson. Despite herself, she was impressed. Most adults talk down to kids Tommy's age, but David was explaining the concept like Tommy was perfectly capable of understanding, which he was. "That actually makes sense," Tommy said, grinning. "Can you show me another one?" "Tommy," Rosa said gently, "we need to catch the bus." "Oh, right." Tommy looked disappointed, but he started walking again. They reached the bus stop just as the number 42 bus was pulling up. Rosa dug in her purse for their bus passes while Tommy turned to David. "Will I see you again?" he asked. David looked at Rosa, who was still watching him with careful eyes. "That's up to your mom." Tommy turned to Rosa with pleading eyes. "Mom, can David come to dinner sometime? He could help me with my math homework. And maybe you could make your famous grilled cheese sandwiches." Rosa's expression softened as she looked at her son's hopeful face. She could see how much this meant to him, having an adult who listened to him, who treated him like he was smart and important. "We'll see," she said finally. The bus doors opened with a mechanical hiss. Rosa guided Tommy toward the steps, but the boy turned back one more time. "David, I forgot to tell you, my birthday's next month." "I'm gonna be 9. "That's pretty exciting," David called back. "Yeah. And you know what? For the first time, I think I might actually want something for my birthday." Rosa paused on the bus steps, and David felt his heart skip. "What's that?" David asked. Tommy grinned that gap-toothed smile. "I want you to be there." The bus doors closed before David could respond. But through the window, he could see Tommy waving enthusiastically while Rosa sat beside him, shaking her head but smiling despite herself. David stood at the empty bus stop long after the bus had disappeared, Tommy's words echoing in his mind. For the first time in his life, someone actually wanted him at their birthday party, not because of his money or his connections or what he could do for them, just because they enjoyed his company. He pulled out his phone and saw 17 missed calls and 43 unread messages. His entire business world was probably in chaos, and somehow he couldn't bring himself to care. Tomorrow, he decided, he was going to figure out how to see Tommy again. 3 weeks later, David found himself doing something he'd never done before, leaving his office early on a Tuesday afternoon. His assistant had looked at him like he'd lost his mind when he canceled his 3 p.m. conference call with investors from Japan. "Are you feeling sick, Mr. Chen?" she'd asked, genuinely concerned. In 12 years of working for David, she'd never known him to cancel a meeting unless he was practically unconscious. "No," David had said, loosening his tie as he walked toward the elevator. "I just remembered I have somewhere important to be." That somewhere was a park bench where he'd been sitting every Tuesday for the past 3 weeks, hoping to see a boy with a superhero backpack and his hard-working mother, The first 2 Tuesdays they hadn't shown up, and David had sat there alone feeling foolish. But something kept pulling him back. Today was different. As he approached the familiar bench, he could see Tommy's small figure already there, bent over what looked like homework spread across his lap. "Having trouble with math again?" David asked as he sat down. Tommy looked up and his face broke into that brilliant smile that David had been thinking about for weeks. "David, you came back!" "I told you I would." "Yeah, but grown-ups say lots of things they don't mean," Tommy said matter-of-factly, then immediately looked embarrassed. "I didn't mean you, I just meant—" "You know?" "I know," David said gently. "And you're right. Some grown-ups do say things they don't mean, but when I make a promise, I keep it." Tommy studied his face seriously, like he was trying to decide if that was true. Finally, he nodded and scooted over to make room on the bench. "I'm trying to do my math homework before Mom gets here, but these word problems are really hard." Tommy held up a worksheet covered in his careful handwriting and several eraser marks. David looked at the problems. They were about calculating area and perimeter, concepts that Tommy was clearly struggling with. "Want some help?" For the next 20 minutes, David found himself completely absorbed in helping Tommy understand how to find the area of rectangles using real-world examples. They talked about calculating how much carpet would be needed for Tommy's bedroom, how many tiles would fit in their small kitchen, how much paint his mom would need if she wanted to redecorate their living room. "Oh," Tommy said suddenly, his pencil moving quickly across the paper. "So if the playground is 50 feet long and 30 feet wide, I multiply 50 times 30 to get 1,500 square feet. Exactly. David felt a surge of pride that surprised him. When was the last time he'd felt this satisfied about anything? "You've got it now." "This is so much easier when someone explains it," Tommy said, working through another problem. "Mom tries to help, but she never really learned this stuff either. She had to drop out of school when she was 16 to help take care of her sick grandmother." David felt that familiar tightness in his chest. Rosa had been Tommy's age once, probably just as smart and curious, but life had forced her to grow up too fast. Just like it was forcing Tommy to be more independent than any 8-year-old should have to be. "Your mom is pretty amazing," David said, "supporting both of you working as hard as she does." "She really is." Tommy finished the last problem and looked up at David. "Can I tell you a secret?" "Sure." Tommy glanced around like he was checking for spies, then whispered, "Sometimes I pretend you're my dad. Like when kids at school talk about their dads, I think about what I would say if you were mine." David's throat went dry. "What would you say?" "That my dad is really smart and he helps me with homework and he has kind eyes and he never gets too busy to listen to my stories." Tommy paused. "Is that okay? That I pretend that sometimes?" David had to clear his throat before he could speak. "Tommy, that's more than okay. That's really special." They heard footsteps on the path, and both of them turned to see Rosa walking toward them. But this time her pace was different. Not rushed with worry, but steady and purposeful. When she saw David sitting with Tommy, she actually smiled a little. "There's my tutor," she said as she approached. "Tommy's math grades have improved so much these past few weeks that his teacher asked what we were doing differently. David makes it make sense," Tommy said excitedly. "Mom, he showed me how to figure out area using our apartment as an example. Did you know our living room is 120 square feet? Rosa sat down on Tommy's other side, and David noticed she looked less tired than she had 3 weeks ago. "Is that right? I had no idea." "We measured it with my math homework," Tommy explained proudly. "Well, I hate to interrupt the geometry lesson," Rosa said, "but I have some news. I got a promotion at work. They're moving me to the day shift, which means regular hours and better pay." Tommy jumped up from the bench. "Really? That's amazing, Mom." "It is amazing," David agreed, genuinely happy for her. "Congratulations." Rosa smiled, and David realized it was the first time he'd seen her truly relaxed. "It means I won't have to work those double shifts anymore. I'll actually be home for dinner most nights. And I won't have to wait at the park as much," Tommy added, then looked at David with concern. "But we can still meet here sometimes, right? For math help and stuff?" David looked at Rosa, who was watching him carefully. Over the past 3 weeks, she'd slowly begun to trust him. She'd seen how Tommy lit up when he talked about their math sessions, how his confidence had grown, how he'd started talking about maybe becoming an engineer someday. "If your mom thinks it's a good idea," David said. Rosa was quiet for a moment, thinking. Actually, I have a better idea. Tommy's birthday is this Saturday. We were planning to have a small celebration at our apartment, just cake and pizza. Would you like to join us? David felt his heart skip a beat. Tommy had invited him weeks ago at the bus stop, but hearing Rosa extend the invitation personally felt enormous. I would love that, he said honestly. Tommy practically bounced with excitement. Really? You'll come to my birthday party? I'll be there. Rosa reached into her purse and pulled out a small piece of paper. Here's our address. Saturday at 2 o'clock. And David? She paused, meeting his eyes. Thank you. For everything you've done for Tommy. For us. David took the paper, his hands shaking slightly. Thank you for trusting me. As they prepared to leave for the bus stop, Tommy suddenly turned back to David. I almost forgot. I have something for you. He dug in his backpack and pulled out his notebook, the same one filled with observations about the park. He tore out a page and handed it to David. I wrote about you, Tommy said shyly. About the first day we met. David looked at the page. In Tommy's careful handwriting, it read, Today I met a man named David who has kind eyes and forgot about time to sit with me. He didn't try to fix everything or give me money. He just listened to my stories and helped me understand math. I think he might be lonely like me, but in a different way. Maybe we can be friends. Below the writing was a simple drawing of two stick figures sitting on a bench, one big, one small, both smiling. David stared at the paper, his vision blurring. Tommy, this is the best thing anyone's ever given me. Really? Really? David carefully folded the paper and put it in his jacket pocket right over his heart. I'll keep this forever. As he watched them walk toward the bus stop, David realized something had fundamentally changed in his life. For 42 years, he'd measured success in dollars and deal closures and board approvals. But sitting in a park helping a boy understand math problems, being invited to a birthday party in a small apartment, being called someone's friend, these moments felt more valuable than all the money in his bank account. His phone buzzed with another urgent email from his office. David glanced at it, then put the phone away without reading it. Some things he was learning were more important than business, and Tommy's birthday party was definitely one of them. Saturday couldn't come fast enough. Saturday morning arrived with David doing something he'd never done in his adult life, standing in a toy store, completely overwhelmed. He'd been there for 45 minutes walking up and down the aisles, trying to figure out what a 9-year-old boy might want for his birthday. The store clerk, a teenager with bright purple hair, approached him for the third time. Sir, are you sure I can't help you find something? You look pretty lost. David ran his hand through his hair. It's for a friend's birthday. He's turning 9, but he's not like other kids. He's more interested in how things work than in just playing with them. Oh, one of those smart kids, she said knowingly. Have you considered a science kit? We have some really cool ones that let you build circuits and do experiments. David's face lit up. That's perfect. He loves learning about how things work. 20 minutes later, David walked out with a comprehensive electronics kit, complete with wires, batteries, LED lights, and a detailed instruction book. It wasn't the most expensive thing in the store, but it felt right. Tommy would love figuring out how to make the circuits work. The address Rosa had given him led to a small apartment building in a neighborhood David had never visited before. It wasn't fancy, but it was clean and well-maintained, with flower boxes in some of the windows and children's bikes chained to the front steps. David climbed to the 3rd floor and found apartment 3B. He could hear voices and laughter from inside. He knocked softly. Rosa opened the door, wearing jeans and a sweater instead of her OL work scrubs. She looked younger, more relaxed, and she smiled when she saw him. David, you made it. Come in. David stepped into a small but cozy apartment. The living room was tiny, but it was filled with warmth. Colorful drawings covered the refrigerator. Books were stacked on every surface, and the smell of homemade pizza filled the air. It felt more like home than his expensive penthouse ever had. David. Tommy came running from what must have been his bedroom, wearing a birthday shirt that was clearly handmade. You really came? Of course I came. I promised, didn't I? David held out the wrapped gift. Happy birthday, Tommy. Tommy's eyes went wide as he took the present. Should I open it now? That's up to the birthday boy, Rosa said. But David could see she was curious too. Tommy carefully peeled away the wrapping paper, trying not to tear it. When he saw the science kit inside, his whole face lit up like Christmas morning. Oh, wow. David, this is incredible. He turned the box around, reading all the projects listed on the back. Look, Mom. You can build a radio and a light-up circuit and even a simple computer. Rosa looked at the kit, then at David. This must have been expensive. It's perfect for him, David said simply. He's going to figure out every single project in that box. Can we try one now? Tommy asked excitedly. After pizza and cake, Rosa said firmly, but she was smiling. We have to eat first. The three of them sat around Rosa's small kitchen table, sharing homemade pizza and talking about everything and nothing. David learned that Rosa had grown up in this same neighborhood, that she'd always dreamed of becoming a nurse but never had the chance to finish school, that her favorite color was green because it reminded her of the garden her grandmother used to keep. Tommy told them about his plans for the science kit, about a book he was reading about space exploration, about how he'd helped an older kid at school with math that week and felt really proud of himself. David found himself sharing stories too, about growing up with parents who were never home, about building his first computer when he was 12, about how lonely success could be when you didn't have anyone to share it with. You know what? Rosa said as they finished the pizza. I never imagined we'd be sitting here like this. 3 weeks ago, I thought you were some rich guy trying to make himself feel better by helping the poor single mother. What changed your mind? David asked. Rosa looked at Tommy, who was studying the science kit instructions with intense concentration. He's different since he met you. More confident. His teacher says he's been helping other kids with math, like he's paying it forward. And he talks about you like... She paused, choosing her words carefully. Like your family. David's throat tightened. He feels like family to me too. Really? Tommy looked up from the instruction book, his eyes bright with hope. Really, David said without hesitation. Rosa stood up to get the birthday cake, a simple chocolate cake with 9 candles that she'd obviously made herself. As Tommy blew out the candles, David found himself making a wish too. After cake, they spread the science kit components across the living room floor. David and Tommy worked together to build their first circuit, while Rosa cleaned up the kitchen. The LED light flickered to life on their third try, and Tommy's cheer of victory made David's heart soar. I can't believe I made electricity flow, Tommy said, staring at the glowing light in amazement. You did it perfectly, David said. You're going to be an amazing engineer someday. Will you help me with the other projects too? Tommy asked. David glanced at Rosa, who was watching them from the kitchen doorway. She nodded slightly. I'll help you with every single one, David promised. As the afternoon wound down, Tommy curled up against David's side on the small couch, tired from all the excitement but still clutching his new science kit. Rosa sat in the chair across from them, and for a moment, they all just enjoyed the peaceful silence. David? Tommy said sleepily. Yeah? This was the best birthday ever. Not because of the present, even though it's awesome, but because you were here? David felt tears prick his eyes. It was pretty special for me, too. Tommy was quiet for a moment, then said, I know you can't really be my dad, but could you maybe be like my bonus dad? Like how some kids have bonus moms when their parents get remarried. David looked across the room at Rosa, who was wiping her own eyes. She gave him a small nod. Tommy, David said, his voice thick with emotion. I would be honored to be your bonus dad. Really? Really? Being part of your family is the best thing that's ever happened to me. Tommy sat up and hugged David tight. I love you, bonus dad. David hugged him back, unable to speak for a moment. Finally, he managed to whisper, I love you too, kiddo. Later that evening, as David prepared to leave, Rosa walked him to the door. Thank you, she said quietly, for showing up, for keeping your promises, for caring about us. Thank you for letting me in, David replied. For giving me a chance when you had every reason not to. Rosa smiled. Same time next Tuesday? For homework help? I'll be there. As David walked back to his car, he pulled out his phone and looked at the 17 missed calls from his office. Tomorrow he would have to deal with whatever crisis had erupted while he was at a 9-year-old's birthday party. But tonight, he had something more important to think about. He had a bonus son who needed help with science projects. He had a friend who trusted him with her most precious treasure. He had a family, Not the traditional kind, but a real one built on love and choice and showing up when it mattered. David Chen had spent 42 years building an empire. But it wasn't until he met a boy on a park bench that he learned how to build a home. And for the first time in his life, he was truly rich.